And we are back. All right, so at the moment, our chat converter that we created on Wednesday will take some kind of color formatting and then either return it as a JSON string or as a section symbol formatted setup for the MOTD in the server properties. So that's our current foundation for defining the color of the glyphs when they are being rendered. That might not be the best way for us to perform the actual text rendering because that would then mean we either need to decode one format or the other, and it might be more interesting if we could or it might be easier for us to handle, say, accepting a list of those individual chat elements and then simply going by those to figure out exactly how this particular text needs to be rendered. That would probably also make it easier to add in some of the other kinds of formats that we can put on text. The one kind of, let's have a look at this quick, the one kind of format that we may not want to mess too much with is the obfuscated one. The reason for basically skipping that one is because it generates a bunch of randomized characters to basically override whatever text was put in there. And in doing so, in the game client, it basically just keeps changing those with more or less every frame update. So it becomes a huge mess. Since we're not exactly doing by frame updating on our UI, we would either have to implement something that can create this obfuscated animation chaos, or simply just accept that every time it's being rendered, it'll assume some random glyph for each letter within the obfuscated text element. It's one of those things. Of course, we can easily put support in there for it. I have seen some Minecraft communities that actually do have obfuscated multicolored text as part of their server's MOTD. Personally, I find them hugely annoying, but some think it's cool adding in that kind of stuff in the server's MOTD. We do, however, want to see if we can support bold, strike through, underline, and italic. Those would be somewhat interesting to put in there, especially if we want to go along the lines of being able to support this, for example. Like they've done here, Apple Craft exclamation point, that's set up in bold. The rest is in regular text. New down here is also set up in bold, and they've put in a lot of rainbow colors here. So if we wanted to do something similar to this, then we at least need to update our current converter so it can properly support this particular setup. In doing so, we may want to consider doing some additional stuff in terms of how we return the individual elements. So we let's have a look at the comment section up here quick. Okay, so when we need to send a message to the game chat, we kind of need to follow the required JSON chat element format, which basically splits up each individual setup into its own little object, and that object basically contains the text that should be rendered, the color it should be rendered in, and whatever else extra formatting needs to be handled there. At the moment, we only support the color setups, and the two methods for basically getting a usable text that can be either sent to the server or stored in the server properties file. We get those out as strings. Fairly straightforward, but it might be interesting to see if we can convert these into actual individual setups that lets us do the text rendering a little easier. So we'll go back to this one. Before we start building all of the actual rendering of it, we kind of need a foundation to work from. Okay, so what kind of stuff do we want to support? We definitely want to support all the colors. We already have that built, but we want to add in obfuscated, bold, strike through, underline, italic. R for reset basically just tells the text encoding to go back to none of the above here and a white color on the text. So it is literally just a reset. It's not something that gets rendered in any way, shape, or form. So let's see if we can construct something that lets us define each of these partial components as an individual element. So let's get a let's get a new, I'm not going to make this as an actual class, I'm just going to do a structure for it. Chat element, there we go. Okay, we probably don't need any of this. That we definitely don't need. And then we'll do a public struct. We know that it'll need a text in here. So we'll put that in. We know that it will need a color reference. We can either do that as a string or save a little space and do a numeric reference and then simply just reference 0 to 15 and then do the text conversion when we need the actual JSON string. If we do it with, say, a byte, then we definitely spend less memory on that. We'll do color. And then we need to, now actually, you know what, let's just do this as a string. It doesn't matter. Because we need to specify obfuscated, bold, strike through, underline, and italic anyway. And we'll set those as booleans, so they'll take up a bit of memory doing that as well. And grab this one, There we go. We'll do one for bold. We'll do one for strike through. There we go. And we'll do one for underline. Now I can't remember whether this needs to be underline or underlined with a D at the end, but we'll find out. And one for italic. There we go. Okay, so this now contains all the core settings for each individual chat element. We may want to put in some constructors for it so we can construct new elements and just pass whatever settings we need to. Let's see. There's no listing of it here. However, if we go down here somewhere, right, yes, we actually need to do some stuff here at some point. Yeah, these need to be set before we write them to whatchamacallits, the server properties. They have to be written as Unicode setups, otherwise it won't work. But when we do that part, we'll add that in there. I was looking to find the reference for, oh, it's in the commands one instead, yes. Let's see, I do believe I have it in here somewhere, tell raw generator. Yes, I may throw a donation your way at some point. Okay, let's add in a text here quick, just to see what this looks like. We'll call that bleh, and then put all of these in here, because then we should get those as part of the code output down here. And since he already did all of this research, this should be fairly easy for us to copy over. Let's see. The obfuscated is exactly like we did. Strike through is exactly like we did. Here we actually get one question answered. There needs to be a D at the end of underline when we put it in as actual JSON code. Italic is as normal and bold is as normal. So this is the one difference. So let's get these put in here quick, and just for our sake, in terms of keeping things in mind, JSON names for text formatting. Grab this one. That needs to be lowercase, like so. The bold needs to be lowercase, like so. Strike through needs to be lowercase like the other one, like so. Get these aligned up. There we go. And then this one is special because it has to have a D on the end, like so, and be lowercase, and this last bit italic. And for the italic, we kind of need to probably go through some screenshots, stuff, so we can see exactly how the game client actually does render these italic glyphs. I know they get offset by a little bit to kind of give them that slant. So it's something that we need to do as well. This is just the update day from hell. All of my different tools are just, oh, you need an update. Yes, I know. Couldn't you have done that yesterday? Okay, any case, let's get some stuff put in here. I know, shut up. Thank you. And in 10 seconds it's going to come up again. Oh, there's an update. Oh, there's an update. I know. Leave me alone. Okay, so it's the age-old Microsoft question thing. You're about to install this. Are you sure you want to install it? Yes. You are about to install that package, and this will affect your system this way. Do you want to install this? Yes. 10 hours later, you're still answering yes to the exact same question. Any case, for the chat elements, we kind of want to put some stuff in here so we can more quickly and easily declare these. And we probably also need to, at some point, change how we construct the actual JSON output so that we only update the properties that were changed from one element to another. So if we assume that all of these flags are false by default and that color is always set to white by default, then if one of these properties are changed, then that has to be added to the JSON stuff and effectively left like that until that property is changed again. So if we throw a reset in here, then we need to go through all of the individual properties to figure out which ones would be affected by that reset, and then put that in the JSON string as well when we build it. Just one of those things that we need to do. So let's get a chat element here and see if we can put some stuff in here. Okay, we know we need one with text. We're probably going to need one with both text and color, so we can specify those only, and then we'll make one that accepts all of them. So we can freely specify them as we see fit. String text and string color, like so. And then the final one, chat elements, we need the text, the color, we need one for obfuscated, we need one for bold, we need one for strike through. Maybe we should rename this to underlined just to keep it the same. There we go. Underlined, and finally the italic. And we could, of course, arrange these in a different setup if we feel that these should be sorted differently. As such, it doesn't really matter all that much. Text equals that one, color equals, we'll leave it at empty, and then we'll set the other ones to false. We may actually need a tri-state setting unless we put in some clever code to handle that, which of course we could do. Strike through, underlined, and finally italic. There we go. And since we need these again in this constructor, and just reference the color there, quick and easy. And the same goes for this one, except of course we add in the arguments instead. So that would be this one, and this would be that one, and this would be this one, and underlined and italic. There we go. All right. Now we've got a structure that contains these control flags and such for the individual chat elements. And then we'll go through and add in another setup here that lets us basically fetch a list of these elements is what I was trying to get to. Alright, so here we will need another method called toElements. There we go. And then we'll do and what should we do here? Should we do an array, or should we do a collection, a list of some sort? Doesn't really matter. I guess we'll just do an array. Why not? Which would then be of the chat element kind, and then this would be the chat text. There we go. And for now we'll just have it return an empty list. There we go. And of course we need a new list. There we go. All right. So for all of this stuff to end up working correctly for us, we should probably try and figure out exactly how we should divide these up into their individual parts. And that could present a little bit of a problem with our current code implementation, because in its current form it basically only looks for color settings, and since specifying two different colors following each other doesn't really make any sense, we're not particularly interested in whether we have one or two setups of control tags. But that's something that we definitely need to be aware of now, since we're going to split them into these individual chat elements. So how are we going to approach this? Well, we kind of need to figure out whether there is one or more control tags in the text coming in, because if we have a look at this quick, we can specify any of the 16 colors, as well as any one or all of these specific formatting codes. As we can see in the examples here on the wiki, this one specifies N, which is the underlined, followed by 3 X's, and then an R to reset, followed by the 3 Y's. In this case up here, we actually have a color specification on the first one, and an underline on the second one. There are some things that we need to be aware of when we start building these chat elements. And then, at least to some extent, attempt to group those changes together so they show up correctly. Um, give me a second here, please. Yeah, that's fine. All right. All right. So let's see if we can get this built. Basically, our chat converter accepts. Let's see, either the format as shown on the wiki right here using the section sign, or we can put in the ampersand instead, and it will still accept those as control characters for doing some kind of change to the text. And that would be the right here, the convert to MOTD, which is actually somewhat incorrect because we need to Unicode escape them before we write to the server properties thing. So we need to update a few things and change stuff around a little bit, and then take it from there. All right, so the convert to MOTD at the moment basically blindly looks for any of the control codes, as well as the two control symbols that we accept, one being the ampersand and one being the section sign. Both of them are acceptable. At the moment it only looks for the colors, but we need to add in the control codes for all the other text formatting stuff as well, so we can correctly put them up. So at the moment we basically just need to make sure that they get replaced correctly as part of the convert to MOTD method. And then from there we will see if we can split by each individual control tag, and then build up the individual elements from that. So let's see what we can get done. We first of all need to add the letters for the additional control codes. K would be for obfuscated, so let's add in K. L for bold, M for strike through, N for underline, and O for italic, and of course there's also an R that we need to put in there for reset. If we are just converting this to L, M, N, O, and R here, there we go. Obfuscated, blah 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 blah, they are there. Alright. Now if we are strictly converting this to stuff in the MOTD, then, which is right here, then we need to we actually need to be able to remove any occurrence of one of the control symbols as well as the R code, because that it's not really something that should go in the MOTD. I guess it can, since they are basically using the same, more or less the same handling routine, so we'll leave it in there. I honestly don't know whether it actually has an effect on how the server handles the MOTD message or not. Never tried it, to be honest. Okay, so the toJSON thing, we're basically doing the same stuff as here. In this particular setup, it strictly looks for the colors color encoding, the text bits of it, but it doesn't exactly include handling of how should I put this? It doesn't include handling of multiple control codes being grouped together. So the current 2JSON setup doesn't exactly do what we need it to do. So we might want to consider basically migrating most of the current string building stuff up to the two chat elements, and then simply use the chat elements to generate the JSON code from that list of chat elements set up. Yeah, let's do that. All right. So one important thing is for this, of course, is to be able to basically group them together like this, so that whatever changes are made happen in a grouped manner, which means we definitely need to keep track of the previous setting for those properties, so we can correctly switch them over as needed, and leave them out if the value has not changed. So that's something we need to keep in mind. All right, in this case right here, this would be, yeah, all right, so if has control tags, this chat text, then we'll process it. And we'll grab the MOTD information here, convert to MOTD chat text. This then returns something like this, for example. And from here, we then need to work out whether we have multiple control tags grouped together, or if they're all standalone. If we have multiples grouped together, we need to be able to put them into the same chat element. And I need a quick drink. There we go. All right. So in this case, down here we actually ended up splitting the entire string into its individual parts based on the section symbol. The reason we did this was so that we could simply just check the first character within each individual part, and from there work out whether there's a control character there, or if this particular section symbol should be added to the actual text or not, and then take it from there. So let's see if we can do something similar up here. I guess splitting them up as individual parts. Yeah, we'll do that. Pretty much the same stuff. That should be fair enough to give us the individual setups, except that we could end up having grouped ones, which means there would be no text. And so we need to expand the existing code a little bit so that it can handle grouping stuff together, and then from there add them to a new chat element as needed. So we basically need to generate a dynamic list of chat elements based on what stuff has been grouped together or not. All right. I guess we'll just grab this down here and then no, we'll do it from scratch. Okay, so this one returns the section sign. I will copy the comments and then we'll do the rest. There we go. That'll be a little easier to keep track of. All right, so we know that we get something like this. We could potentially get something like this. And for, let's say, go over here and grab the underline, which is n. So we could potentially get this as well, and then do like so. Actually, why don't we put that in here just for the sake of argument? Let's do a reset right there. So this is built up slightly different. We still get the colored Sheridan, the separate apostrophe, the colored S followed by a space, and then we switch to gold and underlined. So this would be two control tags which need to be grouped together, followed by the text itself, and finished off by a reset, which then also contains a space, and then all the colored stuff for the version shows up. So these are a couple of examples of what kind of stuff we end up getting from the convert to MOTD method. And from here we need to split this and figure out exactly what needs to be put into each individual chat element. Now, the only situation where we in reality want to add a new chat element is if we actually do have some kind of text to put in the chat element. So there, the minimum requirement is that there is at least one character to put to output as the actual text. If that's there, then we'll put all of these property changes in there. Otherwise we won't, and it will simply just bubble over to the next. Okay, split the above string into its individual parts. So we'll do the part needs to be here. Parts equals motd.split on the section symbol. There we go. And then we need to work through all the parts and figure out what kind of elements we need to put in there. We may also want to keep we need to do a result of some kind, chat element, result, new chat element 0, so we can dynamically add to it as needed. We may want to in some respect keep track of property changes so we can correctly add those in as needed. That way we can minimize the amount of JSON text that needs to go through the remote console access when we want to send warning messages before a shutdown or a restart. And then you might ask, why does it matter how long that particular string is? Well, it does matter because there is a preset limitation to the total length of this particular string. So there are actually limits to how much JSON code we can put in there. That limitation is something like I believe it's 1400 characters in total, something like that, which means if we basically add in all of these properties every single time we build up an individual part of this particular colored text, then we could very easily end up getting a very long string out of it. By us internally handling how these individual properties are set, we can then shorten the resulting JSON string that we get from it just by keeping track of those individual property changes. So that's something we will need to do afterwards. Just a thing we need to keep in mind when we rebuild the to-JSON setup. All right, so here for now, we don't really need to do a whole lot of different things as such, though I do want to grab the chat element structure quick and add in one more constructor. And the reason I want to add this particular constructor is because I would like to be able to set up a singular variable of the chat element type where I can manipulate the properties and then basically use its text setting to determine when it needs to be added to our result array, and then simply just pass the chat element to it. So we'll simply do this and then grab these and copy over the data from the element like so. So in doing this, this of course needs to be uppercase, 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 and here uppercase, like so, and this one, there we go. It's just to avoid me having to type out every individual property within the structure to accommodate for this one. Saves a bit of typing. Alright, so here we will add in another one, chat element, element equals new chat element, and for this we will simply just specify an empty one followed by a color of none. None actually defaults to white, but if we set it to none, then updating the color will change the chat element color property, which means when we need to build the JSON stuff, we can actually keep track of those particular changes just by doing simple checks. Okay, so next up, we basically need to go through more or less the same kind of setup as we have down here. We need to figure out whether it is a color or one of the other control codes, so we can correctly update the individual properties as needed. But other than that, most of it is pretty much identical to this. So we'll start by, except of course here we are building an array instead of adding to a string. So let's go through all the individual parts and see what they actually contain. Yeah, right. There we go. All right. So as we did down here, we started by grabbing each individual part to figure out whether there's actually something in there that we need to check and process. So we'll do the same thing up here. Grab the current part, just for the sake of readability. We don't actually have to define another variable just for this. We can, for the sake of readability, whichever. In any case, we need to figure out whether there's something in this particular part. If it does have a length that's greater than 0, then we need to work out whether the first character is actually a control code or if it is plain text. If it is plain text, then we definitely need to add it. If it isn't, then we need to figure out whether it's a color or one of the other control control elements that we need to set. Okay, so the way that we did it down here was that we simply referenced the control codes and used the index of to search through the list of control codes, referencing the current character or the first character in the part to see if it actually is a control code. And if it is, then we process it. Otherwise, we actually just added the section sign to the string, so it gets added as an actual text. So we'll do something similar up here. Alright, if the control codes index of, and that would then of course be the first character, just like we did before. If this is greater than -1, that means we actually got a position for this particular character, since these are case sensitive, and we know that convert to MOTD handles ensuring that these control codes are of the same case if they are valid. We can very easily assume that this is correct, so no big issue there. Alright, let's see. If we did get this, then we do know that we end up getting one of these. Now, these are have now become a little bit problematic because we've added the KLMNOR codes to it, which means if we pass those to the other helper method that we've got called getJSON color name, then we may end up getting white if it's one of those other control characters, which is kind of a little derpy, I guess. So what we could do here is we could rename this method to be something more generic, to have it return one of the actual keywords that we need to specify as part of the JSON output. And we may end up doing that. Let's see. Yeah, because we still need to work out whether it's a color or it's a control code. Actually, why don't we just do that a little bit differently? Because we know that the first 16 characters of control codes will contain the codes for the 16 colors, and anything above that will then be one of the font control codes instead. So yeah, why don't we do that? Let's grab a variable here and fetch this position. and then we'll work with that variable instead. Alright, so if it's greater than -1, then we can work out whether this is a color change or a formatting change. And the easy way of doing that is if we do get a match, we will get a match of a position of one of these characters, which means this would make up the color selection, and since it's a position, it'll be an index, meaning it's 0 based, so F would be position 15. So we can simply do a check to see if the position that we found is less than 16, then we know it's a color, and if it's greater than 15, i.e. it's 16, then we know that it is a formatting code, and then we can work out which kind of code that is. So that lets us handle this part a little easier. Alright, so let's grab color name here, set that to nothing, format name, set that to nothing. So if this position is less than 16, meaning 0 to 15 both included, then we know it's a color. So let's get the JSON color name based on this particular character, and if it's 16 or greater, then it's an actual formatting code. At the moment, we don't have a specific method to convert that char into a usable string. And I guess for the moment it doesn't really matter all that much. No, actually, let's construct a method that can get the JSON format name. Let's put that in here. Might as well, we need it at some point, right? So get JSON format name. It's a build-up similar to the other one, nothing too complex. I can't even remember what we put in there. Let's see. Control code, that's what we called it. So we'll do this. Same thing. And then we will do another switch. Yeah, do another stitch. Control code right there, and then we'll default this to let's just say none. Alright, so for the control codes, we have a case of K, which is the obfuscated. Here we have the L, which is bold. These are openly available on the wiki, of course. There we go. We have the M, which is strike through. Return strike through. We have the N as the next one, which is the underlined with a ending D, underlined, like so. And then we have the O, which is the italic. There we go. Italic. And of course we do have the R, which is reset, and since we kind of need a way to handle this stuff, we definitely need to return that as a possible value as well. So we'll call that reset just like it's supposed to be. Alright. Okay, so there is the color name, and here is the format name. Get JSON format name based on the character. There we go. All right. So for format name, we definitely need to effectively convert the names into property names for the chat element. So we need to check those. For the color name, we can actually just set the color property of the element right away. In either case, we know for a fact that we need to remove the control code, just like we have done down here, which is this one. So we need to remove that after we have completed this, and then we need to figure out whether there's stuff in the part variable. If there's anything left over, then we need to put that into the text property of the element. If the text property of the element has a length greater than 0, then we need to add it to the array and then reset the text element so we can keep the other properties the way they were, and then just modify those. All right. The element, we'll get rid of this one because we don't need it. We will simply just grab the color property of the element and accept that from here. Other than that, we don't need to do anything more here, because here would be one of the other formatting options, which means killing off that one whatchamacallit, initial character. Because it's a control code, we need to remove it, but we can do that in one swoop by simply just doing it after these two checks are completed. Format name, we don't need that as such. We can just grab the output from this one and do a check here, and then manipulate them individually. Okay, we know that we have a case of obfuscation, obfuscated. We have a case of whatevers. Let's just do a quick copy of these so we get the names and then edit them. There we go. Okay, so if this break, there we go, and another break here, and another one down here. There we go. So we can grab these, and at some point we'll probably make another helper method that converts the properties into these in the form that they need to take. Okay, so if it's obfuscated, then the current element's obfuscated needs to be set like so. If it's bold, then it's the bold property. Strike through needs to be set. Underlined needs to be set. There we go. And the italic, whoops, needs to be set. And if it's a reset, then we need to kill all of them, including the color information. So we'll start by setting the color to none. None basically tells the chat element renderer of the game to default back to white, as far as I know. Then we need to go through all these control flags and set them back to their false state. So we'll start with the obfuscated one, then the bold, to follow the same order that we did before. and then underlined, and finally the italic, of course. There we go. Okay, so these are now set up the way they should be set up. We can enable them and we can reset them. Now, the way that the tellraw generator, the online tellraw generator does things is that, let's see, if we delete this one and then add in one that says underlined, and we underline this one, it will adopt a reset of the color, as you can see. His sample renderer correctly renders it white, just like the game client would. If we add another one and put bold in here, for example, and then enable that, you'll see that in every instance when a new element is added to the list above, his generator goes through all of the properties, looks for some kind of change from what's considered the normal setting, and then defaults that back to its normal setting if there was a difference between this one and the last element. That's a very neat way of cleaning up those property changes. So when we generate the actual JSON text, we may want to go through and do something similar. So we can basically, oh, there's another element here, we'll in effect put in an automated reset of whatever properties were changed. Now that could in some instances cause a slight issue in terms of say continuing an underlined part of it. Say if we wanted to put underline as part of in 10 minutes, if we wanted all that to be underlined, because it's split up in individual chat elements in this generator, that would mean that we would have to force underlined enabled on all three parts to keep that. Now the game chat will continuously render the underlined as part of the text until it actually gets an underlined false as part of a chat element somewhere. That is the actual reset of that particular format option. So for our setup, we kind of need to determine whether we want to do the automated resetting that he does, or whether we want to leave it enabled and thereby basically forcing those particular control tags to be a toggle option. So if you wanted to enable, say, bold for the next few words, and you needed to color them differently, then you would only need to specify bold once at the beginning and bold once more at the end, instead of having say 10 or 15 instances of bold going on and off. Of course we can enable the auto reset of the individual properties, but we would still have to specify as part of the string that we're putting in, or part of the text that we're putting in to produce these custom setups, we would still need to put the control codes in, which means that something like this particular instance of Apple Craft, that would come to a lot of it would come to a lot of control codes just to produce this particular setup if we have all of that auto property handling as part of it. So if, say, we built this up as a, let's grab it as an example, it uses the reds and greens. So to do the apple craft thing, like so, we would then need to put in, say, to begin with, the bold. Let's grab this, which is L. So we would start by putting in and L, and then choosing the color, which in this case is the red, which is 4, and then the capital A. We then need to, let's see, that would be the C, so we'll add a C and then P, and then do 4 to get another P, and so on and so forth. And then we can finally terminate it by toggling the bold off again, like this. Hi, test234QW. Welcome to the stream. If we do the automated property reset thingamajig in the background, we would need to specify both the bold and the color for the next letter in constructing Applecraft like this. So I think it would be easier if we simply just let the properties be properties and kind of force them to become toggle options. That way we won't have to force stupid long control code setups for constructing something like this. It would be a little easier doing that, especially with a lot of rainbow setups like people tend to use. So we'll stick with the toggle setup of these individual properties. Okay, let's see. This would be the control code stuff, so that's this one, which should be that one. Yep. So right here we need to remove whatever control code was there. If there is a control code, blah 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 blah, we need to get rid of it so it doesn't get rendered or written as part of the text. So for the sake of keeping it simple, we'll see if this has a length of 1, then we'll simply just make it empty, and if it doesn't, then we'll grab the rest of this text starting at the first character. There we go. This effectively removes or clears. Remove, clear the control code character. There we go. Now, if we end up in a situation where we do not have a control code, as indicated by the position variable being -1, then we actually need to add in the section sign at the beginning of the text. And the reason for doing that is so that we can put that section sign in there as an actual text. So we'll do that, which is similar to what we've done before. So we'll simply just put the section sign in there and add the part stuff. All right, so down here we then need to work out whether part actually has something left in it. If it does, then we need to treat that as text that needs to be added to the current element. And if it's added in there, then we kind of need to specify that as a separate combined element to the list. So the element text property needs to be equal to part, and this would be the part length thingamajig. So we will go down here. That's the for. There we go. Okay, so if the current element has a text with a length greater than 0, then it's time to add this to our result list. So we'll do a resize on the result list, result length +1, and then we'll copy that over there. Last entry equals new chat element, and then we'll specify our current element. Whoops. I'm a derp. There we go. All right. And since we're doing this, we then need to clear the text property of the element so that it's reset for a new set of changes. So I'll do that, and then I'll take a quick look at tests question. Element text equals empty string. There we go. All right, let's see. Unusual questions. I've been learning C#, especially a Windows Presentation Foundation app, for around 5 months. So it's basically a bug hunting question. I guess I could take a look at your stuff and see if I can spot some kind of bug somewhere. At the moment, well, let me put it this way. This week has been insane in terms of how busy I've been. So I'm kind of looking forward to maybe having half a day of weekend this week to kind of disconnect from code and development projects and bug hunting and people whining about stuff in real life. But if I can find some time here and there, I'll see if I can hint you in the right direction in terms of figuring out what's wrong with the code. But before we do that, test 234 QW, I would like it if you could at least prepare a little bit of kind of bug description. What kind of weirdness is going on? Are you getting any specific error messages, and so on and so forth? If you could prepare a little bit of that stuff, we'll grab a private message after the stream and then take it from there. And see if we can work out exactly what's up with the code. I can't promise you that it's something that I will be able to do today, because I do have some after stream stuff that I need to do, but we can definitely have a look at it at sometime soonish. Actually, hang on a second. Let me see if I have so many windows open I can hardly even keep track of them. Let's see, can I do something here? Nope. So let's see if I can do something here. Well, I found that this one sometimes, let's see. Da, 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 da. Let's see if this will work today. And of course I can't use it here. Blah. Okay, give me a sec here, and I'll just grab this quick, go over here, and go on here, and see if I can find you here then. There we go. Okay, no, I don't want to view your weird ads for movies and whatnot. Here. Sending you a message here. Uh, there you go. All right. Okay, so right. We added the last element there, and that should then take care of building the element list for us. All right, so if we end up doing this as a toggle feature, then we kind of need to figure out whether these are already toggled true or not, and then handle it from there. So that's something we need to put in here. There is a quick and easy way of doing this since we're working with booleans. It kind of does make it a little more difficult to read the code, but I'll show both cases here. So the old or the how should I put this, basic way of doing it, I guess, is to check whether this one is true. If it is, then set it to false, and if it isn't, then set it to true. So this would be false and this would be true, and this would then toggle the flag. Now the quick and easy and cheap way of doing exactly the same thing is to basically do this setup. Does exactly the same thing. It basically just inverts the value and then assigns it to the same variable. So there's absolutely no difference between the two. One is easier to read, one is quicker to write. It's personal preference which one you want to do. If you're just beginning with C#, then this would most likely be the way that you would do it until you learn this shortcut. They do exactly the same thing, so I'll just leave this one up here. The same quick and easy way of toggling the bool variable, and then I'll leave that in there as a comment. And since we're now toggling this stuff, we don't need to force it to be true. Of course, we need to do the same thing for bold, strike through, underlined, and italic. The only case where we don't need to do that is for the reset, since that forces all of the properties to be false. So here we'll use the quick and easy way. There we go. Do the same thing down here. And there's probably an even shorter way of doing this. Like so. There we go. And finally for italic. There we go. Okay. Toggle the setting. And we'll do the same here just to properly highlight them. There we go. So now we have a toggle option for them. So that lets us do handling of these as an actual toggle feature, so we can toggle them on off when we construct the code for it, the control tags for them. Sorry. Okay, so this should take care of handling those as individual chat elements. And in doing so, we do get a list of chat elements, and then we then need to basically update the JSON stuff to correctly accommodate those additional control codes and build the resulting JSON string in the correct setup. So part of doing this is, of course, to get those. Oh, actually, there's one thing that we didn't account for. Here we definitely need to remember to return the result list. And if we find that there are no control tags in the past text, then we actually need to return one element which contains only a text reference and nothing more. No color reference, no nothing, just the text. That would mean that we need to specify a separate chat element here, like so, and we need to specify the chat text above, because that's the only thing that needs to go in there. There we go. This now ensures that we get one single chat element only containing whatever text was passed to it, without any kind of control tag handling whatsoever. Okay, so now we should have a method that can build up a list of individual chat elements. We get an array from it. The result of this should be that we get individual elements, pretty much like this one builds up individual parts of the final text. So we need to grab that array and then effectively grab each chat element. This thing is sometimes so freaking annoying. There we go. I didn't ask you to move the text within the text box. There we go. Okay, so this one builds up individual curly bracket sections for all of the individual parts, and thereby keeps them separate so they can properly be controlled. We're doing pretty much the same thing as part of the text build-up down here, but we may want to consider having our toJSON method basically grab the output from two elements and use those to build up the proper JSON string that it needs to return, instead of doing a separate build-up like we're doing here. So here we are going to trash all of this stuff, and then basically grab a let's see, we need a resulting, there we go, and then down here we'll return that result. We need a list, an array of elements, nice elements, and fetch those from toElements, passing the chat text. There we go. And then we'll loop through them. Now, we should, and I stress should, always get at least one chat element from our toElements method. But of course we don't exactly know. We could end up, actually we should probably check here to see if the past chat text contains something, and if it does, then we will return this, and if it doesn't, then we will simply just return a new empty list, like so. There we go. So if we pass an empty string or a string of pure spaces to this one, we could end up with an array that has 0 elements. So, alright, let's see if we can get some JSON string stuff built here. First of all, let's see if we actually did get some elements. If we do, then we need to build it up. And to do so, we need to loop through them. Length, and there we go. Alright, so we know for a fact that whenever we start building this array of chat elements, we always start out with chat settings set to default, and those defaults are always color is set to none, which the game client renders to white, renders as white. All text formatting flags are false, leaving plain text. Those are the default settings, and that's exactly what the reset control code does. It sets the color to none, clears all the formatting flags, and thereby kills everything back to its default state. So that is the initial way that the chat element stuff is being handled. From there, we need to only add in properties that actually contain some kind of change. So the very first thing we should probably do is to set up our current element, some kind of flag reference thingamajig that we can then check up against when we go through the total list of elements that we've got from the handler, and then basically only add in whatever property changes occurred from the previous element to the current element. So we'll add in a chat element here, like so, and we'll call this current previous element, and we'll do a new chat element, and now my thing has started up again. This contains an empty string and a color of none. There we go. All right. Let's see if we can actually get this thing to reset these again. So annoying. Absolutely hate this part. And this is a problem that still persists. Microsoft, fix your damn code, please. This bug has been in Visual Studio for the past 10 years. And yes, it is slightly annoying. For some reason, IntelliSense at times decides, oh, you hit some random obscure keyboard combination that nobody knows anything about, not even Microsoft, and that basically, IntelliSense doesn't need to pre-select things for me anymore. Of course, I want that to happen, that to slow down the flow of things, I guess. Well. Minor annoyance aside, yeah, just let me restart this quick. There we go. And this usually fixes the problem, and no amount of property changes or settings or whatever for Visual Studio 2017 fixes that particular issue. The only thing that does is shut down, boot up again, unfortunately. Okay, so this now comes with a default setting. So to start building all this stuff, we need to first compare all of the individual properties to figure out whether we actually need to add this or not, and then handle it from there. Since we are, we'll do that last. To do pre and postfix result with brackets, and this is pretty important that we remember doing this. Okay. Alright, so first of all, we need to figure out if there is a difference. The major difference would of course be as part of the individual properties that do not contain the text. For the actual text, we will put that in regardless. The only thing that we otherwise need to handle or figure out is if we need to modify any of this stuff. So we'll go through these one by one. First of all, we know that we actually should probably check the text property of the element to make sure that we actually have to add this stuff. Alright, so let's see, we will do we have, we'll add in a string called element, and we'll reset that here. There we go. And then we'll just use that. Yeah, okay, so we actually do have, yes, here we check that the text property of the currently selected element actually has something in it. If it does, then we'll process it and handle it. If it's empty, then nah, won't bother. Alright, so we'll add in the reference to the text. Like so, with the escaped quotation marks, and then the actual text that needs to go in there, elements S, E, ew, text, and close it off with a final quotation mark. There we go. Alright, so next up, we need to figure out whether the color setting is different. If it is, then we'll add in a color setup, and just for the sake of saving us a little bit of trouble, we'll just add the comma in there. So we'll check if the previous element's color property is different from the current element's color property. If they are, then we need to do two things. One, we need to add the new color specification to the current JSON string being built, and we need to update the previous element because we're going to need that information as part of the next go through of the for loop. So we can correctly change these properties when something changes within them. For the color setup, we don't exactly have a toggle option, so that particular feature is not part of our setup. It's only for the formatting stuff that we have the toggle option available to us. So if we find some kind of color difference, then it simply gets updated there and overwrites whatever was in there previously. So no big issue. We'll add the color reference to the element string as well, and this needs to be pretty much identical to the other one, and we do need to grab it from the array, not the previous element. We'll update that afterwards. Add in the quotation marks, there we go, and then we'll set the previous element to the current one. There we go. This then updates our previous reference with our current setting. So we have it available next time we go through the loop. Okay, so the next part will of course be to figure out the actual text formatting stuff. For the reset control code or control tag, that particular setup is not actually added in as part of the chat elements themselves, because we are basically just clearing those properties up here back to false, which means as we go through them one by one and compare them, those that were previously set get forced back to their individual true-false state. So basically this is a repeat of all the previous ones. If the obfuscated doesn't match the current obfuscated, then we need to add it. However, if we grab the this one quick and have a look at it, we can see down here that the name of the property is correctly listed as a string in quotation marks, and the state of it is just listed as the keyword true or the keyword false with no quotation marks. So we need to replicate that when we build the string. How exactly are we going to do that? Well, we kind of need to be sure that we correctly convert the value of this particular property into its correct setup as a text or a string. Well, we could probably do a... Nah, never mind. We'll just do it straight off the bat. Okay. Let's let's see. For this, we need to add in the element. And we could actually, why don't we just do a quick helper method for this? Let's see. Let's see, get JSON element E right there. We'll do a quick helper here, get JSON element. There we go. And this will just be, no, actually, get JSON flag. Private string get JSON flag, and then we'll put in a name for it here, and then the value. There we go. To a result, like so, and then we'll add in the in quotes, of course, the name, and have it followed up by whatever the value is. If it's true, then we'll add in true to it, or otherwise we'll add in false. There we go, and then we'll just return it. Blah. There we go. Quick and easy. And we were down here, so here we simply just add in the element plus equals get JSON. Oh, did I forget to rename it? I probably did. Yeah. There we go. Much better. Get JSON flag. This would be the obfuscated, and that would be this one. Oh man, not again. There we go. Okay. And just like before, we need to update the previous element with the current one, so we get them updated correctly. In doing this, we ensure that only the properties that have actually changed from chat element to chat element get added to the resulting output. Next is the bold, I think. Get element E bold. So if bold is different, then we'll add the flag to it, which would be bold, and then the elements E bold plus the comma. There we go. Previous elements, update that one with the current one. Whoops. I just needed this part. Thank you. There we go. And what was next? I can't remember. Strike through. I'm doing them in the same order as they are listed here. Just for some kind of commonality, I guess. The strike through is different from the current one. Then we'll add that as well. Get the flag for it, which is strike through elements strike plus the comma, and update it here. There we go. And then it's underlined, and then finally the italic. So the underlined, doesn't match the current one, then we'll add it to get JSON flag underlined, and the one from our current list. There we go. Adding a comma. And yes, I am aware that we will end up having a comma, one comma too many. We'll take care of that in a minute. So this would be the underlined that we need to update with the current value. And finally the, I believe, italic, yes. Italic doesn't match the current one. Then add this one to it. Italic right here, plus the trailing comma, and then update the element with, the property with the current elements property. There we go. Okay, so this now ensures that we only build whichever property has changed. And in doing that, we can easily toggle them on and off as needed without having to build up an excessively large JSON string to throw into the game chat. The longer they are, the more Java has to process. The more Java has to process, the slower it gets, the more lag we see, and so on. That's bad for everyone. Alright, so last bit is, of course, to get rid of one of these excessive commas. The way to do that is basically just to substring -1. Since we know all of these always have a trailing comma, there will always be one too many. So the element stuff that we've got, grab a substring of that, its length -1, that removes the trailing space, trailing comma. There we go. And we now have an element built up with whatever properties need to be in there. So the next part of this would, of course, be to figure out whether stuff was actually added to it or not. If we end up with an empty element, then there's no point in trying to add it to the string that goes to the game server, because it should have been empty. So we'll just do a quick check here. If this element has a length greater than 0, then we need to add it to our result. So result, since we haven't exactly added in the required curly brackets, we will simply do that right here. So we'll add the open curly bracket, then we will add in the element contents for this, and then we will add in the close curly bracket, and again put a trailing comma to correctly separate them. Yes, that will end up with us having one too many commas, but just like we did on the element up here, we'll do it on the result before we actually return it. So that basically leaves us right about here. This is the for loop. This is the for loop. So here we will remove any trailing comma from the result bar. So basically, if result.length is greater than 0, then we'll basically do the same thing as above. Substring this, grab its length -1, because we need to remove the last character. And The last bit to do is to pre and postfix with brackets as needed. So again, we'll just do a quick check. Actually, yeah, we'll just force those brackets on there. So we'll force that open bracket there, add the result stuff, and add a close bracket to it. There we go. And then we can return it. And this should now build up the JSON exactly the way it's supposed to be built, with us having the option to toggle these particular properties on and off as we see fit. Those are things that we can manipulate back and forth any way we see fit, and hopefully be able to send those to the game client as well when we need it to output that stuff. So on the main form we have a test button, and said test button actually produces a dump in the debug output, as well as attempts to send that particular test thing as an announcement in the game. So since we've made a major overhaul of how this control characters thingamajigs is being handled, we may want to go through and properly test that this overhaul actually works the way it's supposed to, and can support that we want to add things like strike through, underlined, bold, and so on and so forth. We will go through and do that test right after this message from our sponsors. Nah, I'm kidding. I know that people are joining in right now. That's awesome. Welcome to the stream. I usually break up in about 2-hour segments with a few minutes break between each segment. First one is at 2, the second one is about at 4. So we're about to hit one. Please hang tight. We'll do a quick break. I need to respond to a nature call. That's the downside of drinking coffee. But I will only be gone for a couple of minutes, and then we'll pick up this and do some test runs and see exactly how much of this chat element stuff overhaul we've done is actually working the way it's supposed to. We'll do that right after the break. See you in a bit.